yourselves, you introduce yourself and your teacher, and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm Jeff Owen, retired Chief Operating Officer of the American Bankers Association here in the Washington area.
And my name is Jocelyn Broman. I'm an alum of the program, and I currently work on Capitol Hill for the Committee on Natural Resources, doing tribal policy and insular policy.
My name is Scott Barnhart, I work at the Indian Attorney General's Office as Chief Counsel and Director of Peace Corps Protection. I'm also a alum.
Hi, my name is McKay Garvin, and my favorite branch of our government is the legislative branch because of the way it holds representation from people all over the United States.
Hi, my name is Quraisha Khan, and my favorite branch of our government is the media, because although not an official branch, they represent the thoughts of the people most accurately.
Hello, my name is Bryce Thompson. My favorite branch of government is the executive branch because of its ability to take swift actions on matters.
Hi, my name is Julian Stan, and my favorite branch of government is the judicial branch because of their use of rule of law and job in determining the constitutionality of laws. And on behalf of Unit 4, our advisor Gretchen Wolfing, Tahoma High School, and the great state of Washington, we thank you for judging us today.
Thank you. Let me read the question. We are going to read question number 2. The presidency is like a soft leather glove, and it takes the shape of the hand that's put into it. And when a very big hand is put into it and stretches the glove, stretches the office, the glove never quite shrinks back to what it was. How is presidential power expanded, specifically through the cabinet and administrative agencies? And what is your evaluation of the expansion over time? How have the legislative and judicial branches allowed the expansion of presidential power or attempted to curb it? Has one branch been more effective in doing so? Is there a justification of presidential power expansion because of an actual or perceived voter mandate for the president to take control? Why or why not? Please begin.
Under the doctrine of the separation of powers, the way in which the president exercises his personally assigned responsibilities are not subject to questioning by another branch of government. Richard M. Nixon.
The executive branch's bureaucratic expansion of power is a byproduct of the legislative branch delegating many of its constitutional powers to the cabinet and administrative agencies. For example, in 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson initiated the creation of the Department of Transportation through an act of Congress. The act partially delegated the power to regulate interstate commerce, given through Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, from Congress to an agency of the executive branch.
Furthermore, delegation by Congress has led to the expansion and specialization of administrative agencies. An example of this being the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA, created in 1970 by President Richard Nixon, and Congress promptly delegated its environmental responsibilities to the EPA, such as in Section 111D of the Clean Air Act, where the EPA was given broad regulatory authority over private sector power plants.
Additionally, Congress is given the power of controlling the budget in Article 1, Section 7, Clause 9 of the Constitution, which can be used to limit the expansion of power in executive agencies. However, these agencies spend $516 billion in a yearly budget cycle without going through congressional appropriations. Congress could limit this spending through legislation, but has failed to pass an act that does so. This ongoing inaction by the legislative branch shows its unwillingness to curb executive power and its continued delegation of power to the executive branch's cabinet and agencies.
The legislative branch has failed to curb, and rather facilitated the executive branch in its expansion of power, while the judicial branch has checked the executive branch effectively. An example of Congress failing to check the executives can be seen in the Iran-Contra affair. Between 1982 and 1984, Congress passed 3 amendments to appropriation bills, banning all U.S. assistance to the Contras in Nicaragua.
President Ronald Reagan violated these amendments by facilitating the sale of arms to Iran. But because of party loyalty in the legislative branch, congressional oversight failed to hold the president accountable for his illegal overreaching power.
On the contrary, the judicial branch has been most effective in curbing the spread of presidential power by enforcing the non-delegation doctrine, such as in the 1935 case of Schechter Poultry Corp. In the United States, where the court struck down portions of the National Industrial Recovery Act that gave President Roosevelt the regulatory authority over the economy through fair practice codes. While Congress has been overly differential to the executive, the judicial acts as the mediator of power between these two branches.
Additionally, presidents have used wars and emergencies or created an emergency to expand their power without the consent of the people who elected them. The idea of voter mandate justifying the president's action during this time is improper, as presidents have used such wars and emergencies to greatly stretch the bounds of presidential power.
For example, following the events of 9/11, President Bush directly authorized military operations in Afghanistan, actions that directly were in conflict with the War Powers Act of 1973, which requires that the president notify Congress of the engagement of federal troops. This led to Operation Enduring Freedom, where the U.S. exercised troops for 20 years.
Another example of presidencies in power can be seen when President Donald Trump declared a national emergency in 2019. President Trump used the National Emergencies Act in 1976 to declare an emergency along the southern border in order to redirect funding for a border wall, invoking U.S. Code 2808, which allowed for the diversion of military construction funds.
President Trump created this emergency even though there was no immediate threat along the southern border, instead expanding the powers of the presidency to satisfy a personal agenda. In conclusion, while a perceived voter mandate is no justification for the expansion of presidential power, executive agencies have nevertheless been delegated power by Congress, leaving the judicial branch as the primary check on the executive branch. This aggregation of power in the hands of the executive is a worrying erosion of the separation of powers. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So, let's pick up on your powers discussion and talk to us about executive orders. Are executive orders out of hand, given the history of those and where we are today?
Executive orders derive their power from the Take Care Clause in Article 2, Section 3, and I believe that they are not out of hand as long as they are signed for their particular purpose. The president is meant to be the energetic executive that acts in times of wars and emergencies, and executive orders are a way to bypass the deliberative nature in Congress of be able to address these issues in a quick manner, such as President Biden and President Trump with vaccine and COVID executive orders mandating masks and fast-tracking vaccine production, which was able to help us in that time of emergency.
Adding on to my colleague's point about the energetic executive, the reason why we have the Take Care clause, which allows the president to take these executive actions, is because the founders intended the executive to be energetic as possible. As explicitly stated in Federalist 70, Alexander Hamilton said, quote, "Energy in the executive is a leading characteristic in the definition of a good government," end quote, implying that these powers and the president's ability to take these executive actions were intended.
I would disagree with my colleague stating that executive orders are not out of hand. While I agree that executive orders are certainly needed in times of war and emergencies, we can see within our last 20 presidents compared to our first 20 presidents that regardless of whether America has been in a time of war or emergencies, the amount of executive orders passed has greatly passed the threshold that it has when America was first conceived.
Presidents can use executive orders in a negative way. This was seen with 9066, which was the internment of Japanese Americans. However, this was during a time of war and emergencies, but later on it was viewed as a negative use of this power because it did discriminate against a certain group of people.
So this goes to the question that you brought up at the end of your statement, like who defines an emergency?
That's the whole reason that this is a worrying erosion of the separation of powers. The president can declare a state of emergency over pretty much anything, and it is only up to judicial review, which was established in Marbury Madison, for the judicial branch to come in and do that. But they have not, in the recent presidents, checked this presidential power of declaring a national emergency.
Why haven't they?
Well, the judicial branch has been highly deferential to the executive branch in these times when they declare wars and emergencies. As seen in the Korematsu v. United States decision, although they said in the written opinion that they disagreed with the way that President FDR went about interning these Japanese Americans, they believe that it was necessary in this time of war and emergency. So they're willing to let loose this executive branch, which I believe is something that is wrong and should be addressed more thoroughly.
Well, where's the legislature's responsibility, right? So you mentioned the War Powers Act. Why come they don't pass legislation that says, no, here's what you do, and here's the authority that you have in response to your Bush example? Let me ask you in a slightly different way. Can Congress clamp down on the presidential power and expansion of power?
Absolutely, Congress can clamp down on presidents and their expansion of power. Most notably through budget, the power of the budget, as in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, which allows Congress to set the budget for the United States government. They can clamp down on executive powers and these executive agencies expanding their powers by limiting the executive agency's fundings, thereby decreasing federal and presidential power.
And to answer the first part of your question as to why the legislative branch doesn't do this, I think that oftentimes political parties gets in the way of the legislative branch actually performing their duties. Oftentimes when the two chambers of Congress are of the same party as the president during that term, I think that they're less likely to really engage in the separation of powers and hold the president accountable.
Let's talk a little bit, you mentioned specialization in the executive branch and in the agencies. Why, let's just take all that and let's put it in the congressional branch.
I do not believe that is a good idea, and that is because Congress has so much on their hands already. They already have to legislate, they have to hold the opinions of their voters. Congress being the deliberative body of our government, does not have the time to take up these agencies of the executive branch, because the executive branch was meant to be the energetic agency, the energetic branch. Congress and its deliberative nature simply wouldn't get enough done.
I disagree with my colleague. In Federalist 15, it was mentioned that man's passions will not listen to the voice of reason without some types of fetters. And so I think that, for example, the fear of re-election that Congress faces is definitely a fetter. And so when we have unelected officials in executive agencies that are making decisions for the rest of the America, I think that that's unintelligent, and that I think that people in Congress should be in control of that instead.
Congress does also have a say. They can decide whether to create an executive agency, and as we elect our representatives, we somehow, as the people, have a way in deciding how Congress does create an executive agency, because we put our trust that our representatives will decide to create a new executive agency depending on what issues arise and how they need to be solved.
So FDR ran 4 times, and it changed to 2 terms. We are where we are today with gridlock and all of that going on. Would it make sense to increase or change the term of office to 1 6-year term? Does that make any sense?
In the 22nd Amendment, we limited the president to a 4-year term. And I believe this is the more ideal way of doing it. We need to be able to have these elections semi-frequently as opposed to a 6-year thing, 6-year option, so that we can gauge the way that our states are voting. This is important in just general election theory of knowing what state are blue states, what state are red states. If we talk about gerrymandering, we need to be able to have these presidential voting as a occasion and an anniversary are very important to our democratic system.
George Washington, one of our first president, was, in my opinion, one of the best presidents in our history, and he set the norms for 2 terms. And I do believe presidents who act ethically can go with 2 terms as long as they follow norms and they respect the public's opinions and they do not try to become tyrannical while they are in office.
But isn't there an argument to be said that presidents just need more time to actually get their agenda in order? Like, is 8 years, if they even can get reelected, actually enough time to do their full agenda?
I would argue that yes, 8 years is enough. And when we're looking at the 2 terms of 4 years, presidents have plenty of time to get their agenda passed. It's just the midterm elections that shake up what they're able to accomplish in Congress. We've seen this with President Biden recently, how he was able to pass many historic legislations while working with the 117th Congress, which has actually been the most productive Congress since the 1990s. We saw that President Biden, working with the Democratic trifecta, was able to accomplish most of his agenda. And now what we're seeing is that his agenda is held up because of the results of the midterm elections.
I would disagree with my colleague. Oftentimes there is dialogue about how President Jimmy Carter wasn't exactly an efficient president, but I think that that's because during his administration, his time as presidency, he was shackled with the previous problems of the administrations before him. But then after he finished his term as president, he was able to get a lot more work done for America. And so I think that having a longer time for the president to actually do his work as a president can be more efficient for changing our nation for the better.
Great job.
Well, this was a very lively discussion. You all are well prepared, like your presentation and the depth, but I also like, we threw some stuff at you here. And I like the way you dealt with it, thought it through, but also were able to, in meaningful ways and thoughtful ways, quibble with each other a little bit, which I think is a very mature presentation. And thank you, well done.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You guys did a great job of taking some of these ideas and just like talking about them in creative ways. I think this is one of the questions that we're all kind of trying to figure out and balance as citizens. Like, we're all going to be voting for presidents. We're all going to try and figure like where should their powers be, and these are all questions that we're trying to figure out work well for us. And so you guys did a wrestling with that. I mean, I work in Congress, so I'm like, I would like all the technical expertise in Congress so that I can take advantage of it as a staffer, but there is this question about where should that be? And you guys did a great job of supporting your opinions and bringing them to the floor and answering our questions well. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I particularly in your opening, I thought the bold and assertive opening and set the tone, you know, for your positions. I thought it was great. You had the use of citations and stats, and you listened intensely and answered our questions, right? So I appreciate circling back and saying, here's the answer to your question, and then we're not just dodging it. So, in the end, disagreement's good. These are difficult questions, and you wrestle with that. So, very well done. Good job.